Well, Harriet, what I would like to know is, first of all, can you just tell us a little bit about your life with Marv as a missionary?
I would be delighted. We had 54 years of marriage before the Lord took him home, and during that time we spent most of that time in missionary service. Um, we were missionaries in Papua New Guinea and in Australia and a short time in Panama. And he also pastored a couple churches when we were on an extended furlough. So he's been in ministry most of our life. And a rich, rich blessing and no regrets about our past. It was a wonderful life together.
And you originally met at Biola University when you were both going to college there.
Well, not quite. I went there. He didn't go to that school. When I came home from Biola, I was pianist for the Youth for Christ of Sacramento. And he came to town as the new song leader and Bible club director, and that's where we met. And we were married in Sacramento and then moved on with our life for missions after that.
Okay. Can you tell us about the village in on the island of New Britain, was it?
Yes.
That you lived in with Marv. What was that like?
Well, it was very primitive. There were only two ways to get into that village. One
What year was that, by the way?
This was in 1989.
Okay.
Would have been fall of '89 when we went in there. You could hike in, but you crossed a very treacherous river 40 times on the hike
Wow.
up into that mountain. Or the only other way was to fly by helicopter, which is what we did. Our two sons were actually missionaries in that village, in that tribe. They were called the Ata people, and the actual village was Kaiko. And it was so primitive. I can't even probably get you to imagine how primitive it was.
Had they seen white people before?
They had seen white people in that occasionally an Australian policeman would go through, and they would see this individual at that time. But otherwise, they had never had anybody live with them. My two sons built houses out of bamboo, and they had metal roofs so they could catch water and have drinking water. But the village was extremely primitive, lived in little huts, grass huts.
No, let me interrupt you just a moment.
Sure.
From the grass huts. The metal roofs, that sounds like a thing from modern civilization. Was that before you came there, they had the metal roofs?
Well, you see, I have to go back. We were there in the 60s when there were no metal roofs. It was grass roofs. Before we left the islands back in those days, we did have metal that came in from Australia, and we were able to put metal on roofs at that time. And from then on, the missionaries basically used metal to make their water supply more convenient. And the house itself would have been bamboo, and then the framework is trees. There was very little sawn lumber, but it was mainly trees.
Small trees.
Small trees that were used, yes. I've forgotten our train of thought on that
Well,
now.
you had a house just for your family too, right?
Yes, when we went there with our young boys, we did have our own little house, and then Marv built our own house. We had borrowed one to live in while he built our house. This was back in the 60s, very primitive days. When we were there in '89, there was progress as far as building materials that were available compared to what we had in the 60s.
Did they bring those in by helicopter?
Yes,
That must
very
have been very
expensive.
expensive. Yeah.
Very expensive. Yeah.
Now, you had one major sighting of a very strange creature there. Tell us about that.
Yes, my son Steve lived on one end of the village. My son Matt lived on the other end. And to get from one home to the other, which is what I was doing, I was walking from Steve's house to Matt's house. You walked a very narrow path.
How far would that have been in terms?
I would say like a city block.
Okay.
Yeah. And to get there, you walked a very narrow path up above a riverbed, which, as I was walking to my right, it dropped off very steeply. The river was way down.
Probably 1,000 feet or something.
Yeah, very far down.
Okay.
You wouldn't have wanted to tumble off that path.
Uh-huh.
But I was walking on that path, and as I approached the area of my son Matt's house, something caught my attention out of the corner of my eye to my right. And I was so shocked at what I saw. Never had heard of such a creature, never had seen one before. I would estimate that the bird was flying about 20 feet from me, which seemed very close, as in really scary.
20 feet above you?
No, to my side.
Oh,
He was
okay.
almost level with me.
Okay, but he was over the gorge.
He was over the gorge.
Okay.
He was soaring. He was not in active flight. He was soaring. The wings were so interesting because the back edges of the wings had like webbing. It was like a scalloped edge to the wings.
Were they have feathers, or was it more leathery like?
Had no feathers. If I was to describe it, I would say it was more like maybe snake skin.
Did you see scales, or was it just smooth?
No, it was more smooth than scales, but it had no feathers, no covering like that of any kind.
Was it shiny, or did you notice that?
It was kind of like a battleship gray color, maybe a little lighter than that in color, but I can't say that it was shiny. It would have been a dull, leathery look.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked at the face of the bird, which was a peaked beak,
Long
beak.
How long would you say the beak was? I mean, I know you can't.
It's a little hard, to figure measurements, but I guess I would say maybe like 2 feet.
Wow.
Or 1.5 feet
Wow.
out in front of the bird.
Did it have a crest also going back?
It had a very big crest going out the back of the head.
Okay.
I did not see a tail. My husband had seen that bird at another time at a further distance, and he felt it had a tail, that he could see a tail. I did not see a tail.
Did you see any claws on the front of the wings?
No, I did not notice anything on the front of the wings. But
What about feet in the back?
I did not see any feet, and as we talked about it as a family, we figured probably the feet were folded back
Yeah.
behind it in flight, like that.
What did I want to ask you? We got the feet, the wings.
Was the mouth open or closed?
The mouth was closed. I did not see it open at all.
No teeth sticking out?
No teeth. I didn't see anything like that. It was very sleek, actually, looking, because
Very aerodynamic?
yes,
It was soaring on the wind, right?
it was soaring.
Let's digress for just a second here. My understanding is that the spine of the mountain range in New Britain runs east to west, and there are these deep valleys that run north and south.
Correct.
And the trade wind comes from the south, is that correct?
Yes.
So you have this wind almost constantly going up the valleys, so it would make ideal soaring grounds for a big bird or pterosaur of that sort.
Yes, that would be true. He was, I did not see any movement of the wings. He was truly soaring on the draft of the wind that he was catching. Yeah, I didn't see the wings move at all.
How quickly was it moving forward?
Not fast enough for me.
How big would you say this creature was?
Overall.
Overall, I guess, well, each wingspan, I think probably would have been 6 to 8 feet each wing.
So it would have been like maybe 15 feet from one tip to the other tip.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
It was very frightening to
Now,
me.
did it remain in the same position all the time, or did it rise up or change its position in relation to you?
No, in relation to me, he was just soaring up there like he was having a Sunday afternoon trip kind of thing.
And you only saw that one?
I only saw that one. My son and my husband saw 3 of them, but at a farther distance where they could not see any of the detail or very much of the detail. But they did see 3 of them flying along another branch of the river, going up.
And they were also soaring like that?
Yes.
We've heard stories that these creatures dip down into waters, like maybe the ocean or rivers or whatever, and eat fish. It sounds like it might be an activity from that vantage point that they might do. Was there sources of fish somewhere down below?
There may have been. Our people in that tribe did not eat fish, whether it was their custom or whether it was because there weren't many. I don't know.
Well, the fish would have been a long way from them, especially if you figure they have to go down those steep mountainsides.
Right.
But a creature that could soar could just drop down and pick them up.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, if
Yes.
there were fish down there.
Yeah.
How far were you from the ocean?
Oh, I really don't know, but it wasn't very far because that island isn't that big.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is very mountainous.
Just for the record, could you say, like, did it look like a pterodactyl?
Absolutely.
had the privilege of living in the village of
something I only
Pico,
saw
in
visiting my
books.
sons and being there with them, my husband and I, and I got up one morning and decided to go down and visit my son Steve. We were staying in one home of one boy, and Steve lived about a city block away, in another home, and I went down and spent time with my son and my grandchildren in that home.
And this village is way up on our ridgetop.
Very high in the mountains, very high, and it was on a ridge. And in fact, when I was going back to the home where we were staying, I left Steve's house and walked a very narrow ridge pathway that ran on top of the ridge that went down very steeply into the riverbed. I was not too far from the home where I was staying. Something caught my eye to the right of me, and as I glanced over, I saw something that I had only before witnessed in books. I didn't know there were such creatures at all, but it had a big wingspan. It had no tail. It had scalloped or webbed wings at the back. It had a very sharp, long beak. I never saw it open, but a long, narrow beak. And then out the back of its head was a crest that went out the back. I was actually terrified because it was such an unusual thing, and being in a very remote village in a country like New Guinea, it was really a frightening activity for me that I saw it.
Did you fear that it could pick you up and maybe carry you off?
Well, I had heard that, but I don't know how factual anything like that is because it was a big bird. I didn't see its claws, its talons, or whatever, but it's very possible that it could at least have picked up a child.
So what did you do after that point? Like, okay, if we go back in time to exactly when you saw it and then it disappeared,
Yeah.
or did you run away from it, or
I
what
did.
happened?
I ran as quickly as I could to my son's house because I was absolutely terrified. Never, never approached seeing anything like that before in my life. And I did. I ran into Matt's home just really frightened and
Did
took a
you notice
while.
whether the bird was following you or not, or
I don't know because I didn't see it until it was even with me, and it was about at the same height that I was, but about 20 feet away from me,
out over the valley?
out over the valley of the river. Yep.
Did you see any eyes?
No, I can't say that I saw any eyes particularly, but then most of the bird's front was just beyond me too, because what was really level with me were the wings. And I saw the beak, but I was not aware of eyes.
Okay, then. I think I get an idea on where it was facing. So it's like to your side then. It was like parallel to you?
The wings were parallel to me.
Okay. I'm gonna see if I can get like a picture kind of like drawn up of that then.
Okay.
And now, could you tell me? Steve mentioned seeing these, and Marv also. Did they had this one experience where they saw three of them above another river valley, and they were kind of soaring together. Did they have any other experiences where they saw pterosaurs or anything that looked like it could be a pterosaur?
Not that I know of. It was just that one time. And in fact, one of them mentioned to me they wondered if the one I saw was a young one because the others were flying together, and it was kind of like, well, I wonder what this guy was doing straying away from the crowd. But they wondered if it might have been a young one.
I'm wondering maybe too if it could have maybe been an older male, because you know in the animal world sometimes the older males kind of don't get to be part of the family type of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Could have been. Could have been.
Okay, I'm going to zoom kind of out here and I'm going to show you two together.
What kind of hardships did you have over there? I mean, it must have been all kinds of things that you take for granted here that you didn't have there.
Yes, hardships there were, well, when you try and take care of a family, it was ordering in groceries by a supply man, and you might or you might not get what you ordered in, but you were thankful for whatever you got in. We had no refrigeration, so our meat supply was very slim.
And it would be in a can, probably.
Canned meat, that's correct. We did have wonderful fruit, the bananas and pineapples and papaya, passion fruit. Those were wonderful things.
Right
and
off the property there, probably.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Keep on going.
And another really difficult thing was when you needed medical help, you were so far from help. We did have access to a registered nurse by radio, and she could give us advice and help. And same way when we were treating the national people for their maladies.
So you had some medical supplies there, but you didn't really know how to use a lot of them.
Right. The government of New Guinea was very good to provide a lot of medical supplies. Medicines for malaria, for a disease called yaws, which is quite a bit like leprosy, pneumonia, burns, and they were very good to provide a lot of those medicines for us. And then we would hold, usually every day of the week, a little clinic where people could come, and we'd give them what help we could. One gentleman came in and he complained about the big pain in his ear. And so Marv looked in his ear with a scope thing that we had, and it didn't look infected, but we didn't know what else to do, so we gave him a series of antibiotics thinking maybe he had an infected ear. That didn't work. He kept coming back, "Mississy," and he'd call me and want me to help him with the pain in his ear. So I resorted to what my mother would have done when I was a little child, put warm oil in his ear. And I did that. All I had was cooking oil. And I put a few drops of that in and put a cotton in and told him to hold his head over for a little bit. After a few minutes, I had him tip his head over for me, and I held a piece of gauze under his ear, and out of his ear came a worm. That's what was bothering him. And he told me he was going to the coast. And I said, okay, I'm going to put this in a bottle. You take it to the medic and ask him what's going on. And, where did this come from? So we had some experiences of treating the people and loving them and caring for them in a very strange and primitive place.
Now, I think I remember Marv saying something about those people being pretty vicious at one time.
Oh, yeah.
Were they headhunters or anything like that?
They were, when we arrived there in the early 60s, they were cannibals. And they were still eating people. One young man that was not right mentally tried to take Marv's life, and they attributed his problem, they being medical people, attributed his problem to eating babies out of the graves. He would dig them up and eat them, and it was a very vicious and violent society at times. And my husband had some very close calls.
Did he say anything about the chief of the tribe? Hadn't he been one of the more violent ones?
Yes. The chief, sometimes he had that, that reputation of being the big man, as they call it, but he may have been the most violent. And I do recall one of the tribes we lived in, the first man that acknowledged salvation through Christ was the chief. And he is the man that was known to have eaten the most people. And Marv asked him about it one day, and he counted, and they turn their fingers down when they count. And then he looked at his toes, and he said, I have killed and eaten more than I can count, but God has forgiven me.
He became pretty good at memorizing scripture, didn't he?
He did. Yes, I can still see him sitting in our home. We had him come and eat with us, and they wouldn't sit in a chair. They always sat on the floor or the ground.
Was that out of respect, or was that where they were more comfortable?
They were more comfortable that way, yeah. And while everybody was eating, he had his Bible and he just read and read and read. He'd been taught by missionaries to read. He read and read and read. I don't know if the man ever ate.
And he was reading in the language that the missionaries had created a written language for.
That's right.
For his own language.
That's right.
Yes.
Yes, that was the Yagariya language of the eastern highlands of New Guinea. Yeah. What a
Amazing.
privilege we had to work with them.
Yes. And have you heard anything more about them today? What's going on today with them?
Yes, in fact, a young boy that had helped me with getting firewood and helped me carry water. We had him in our home and we were teaching him to read. And he had acknowledged Christ as his Savior and grew up to be a man. And now today, he's a grandfather, but he has a son who's a pastor and a grandson who is a pastor. And that's a lot of, that makes us rejoice.
And beyond the next world that we will know, their life in this world must be a lot more peaceful than it was at one time.
It is. It definitely is. Even a 40-year span of time has brought a change. And they now are no longer under Australia. They have their own government, which is interesting, but they have their own.
Speaking of Papua New Guinea,
Yeah, speaking of Papua New Guinea. Yes,
New Britain being one of the provinces of Papua New Guinea.
that's correct.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Well, that's about all I can think of to ask right now. If you have anything else further you want to add, or if anybody else has some ideas.
Well, you know, there are going to be the different people that's going to say, oh, she didn't see what she thought she saw. What would you kind of like, if you were speaking to some of the people that's kind of skeptical, what would you say to them? You're always going to run into that, granted.
Well, you told me on the phone one time, I heard you say this, and you might want to say it a different way, but, you know, people might say that I'm crazy, but I know what I saw.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. I know exactly what I saw when I saw it. I could take you today if we could go there. I could take you to the spot. And it's the same area that my husband and Steve saw the 3 other ones going down the branch of another river. I could take you there today, and I know what I saw.
We're thinking of doing that. Are there some people that could be used as intermediaries for language that can speak English, that could speak with these people?
Possibly now there would be. My son, who worked there for a long time, also knows the trade language very well. And at this late date, there are a lot of tribal people who now know the trade language.
Now, is this Steve you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm. Steve.
And by trade language, you mean the language that they use to trade with other tribes and with the foreign
Yes,
people?
it's called Pidgin English. It's a written language, has its own grammar and all of that, but it is, yes, it's between English and the tribal.
And in those days, when you first went there, they didn't have people that spoke that language.
That's correct. Yeah. Now, this many years later, they do. Yeah.
Exciting things.
Yeah.
Do you remember the year or the day, like time of year that you saw that creature?
I do.
Okay, let's get that down.
The time of year you saw the creature.
And the year, the year.
It was in the fall of 1989.
Is that in the southern hemisphere?
Yes.
So fall would be spring our time here.
Right.
Okay.
It would have been November
Okay.
because
Well, November
we were
would be spring here. I mean, spring there.
spring over there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
We were.
And of course, there's not much difference between spring and
Right.
summer.
But we
fall.
were about 4 degrees off the equator,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and
So you probably had a wet season and a dry season, or maybe 2 wet seasons.
they used to call it the rainy season and the rainy season. We had rain
Okay.
every day almost.
Uh-huh. Well, that would make it even harder to control all of those germs and pesticides.
Oh, yes. And the people weren't used to cleanliness, and so when they would get a sore from a stick or a bush or something,
And they were barefoot, I'm sure.
oh yes, it would get infected almost immediately, and it could. I've actually seen ulcers that on a leg that has eaten clear through to the bone. So
I went to Cameroon. We went down into the Congo, and I had a little scab from either a bee sting or maybe a blackberry bush or something on my leg, my shin, when I went there. And I didn't think much about it.
right,
By the time I came back, my leg had swelled up twice its normal size, and it was all red. And the doctor told me if I'd have been 2 more days before I got back, I might have lost my leg. He put me on the highest antibiotics he could give me for a month, and it finally went down. But I learned a little something about infection in the tropics.
was it cellulitis by any chance, or
I
he
don't
didn't
know what
call
it
it
was.
that?
He didn't know for sure, I
Yeah.
don't think. He just knew it was really
Yeah.
infected.
Yeah. And another thing, you could give them the medication and you'd say, now take this, I'll give you this today, take one tomorrow and one the next day and one the next day. You may as well be talking to the wind. They don't know.
Uh-huh.
They don't follow that.
Yeah, yeah.
You have to give it to them manually, individually, at the appointed time.
That's assuming they'll come back when they're supposed to.
Yeah.
Probably didn't do that either, imagine.
No, they didn't. I
Did
can
they
re-
understand the instructions at the time?
Well, we gave them as best we could in pidgin, and
Uh-huh.
sometimes we would have what they called their little children monkeys. And once in a while we'd find a little monkey that he seemed to understand pidgin, and he would take what I said in pidgin and turn it into his mother's talk or whoever he was trying to help. And you hope they translated it right, but you don't know.
No way to prove it.
Were the wings very broad? You know, like a seagull has kind of these long, thin wings. Was it like that, or were they a lot wider?
No, they weren't thick.
Okay.
What I would call thick. They weren't thick.
Well, I mean, like the.
But the front of the wing was straight.
Okay.
And then it came back and broadened out from a narrow tip,
Exactly. Yeah.
came back and scalloped or whatever you
How
call it.
far would it be from the front of their wing to the back of their wing, do you think?
I don't know.
Maybe the length of the beak or something. Maybe twice the length of the beak.
I really
You were
don't-
looking so intently at the back of those
Oh.
wings that you didn't really notice the rest of the wing, probably.
That's right. Yeah.
That-
And I
yeah.
got out of there so quickly.
Right.
And also, you say you didn't see the claw marks on the wings. It's possible that they could have had them under.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you may not have noticed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You're not going to see it. How many seconds did you see it?
that's a good thing that should be on the interview.
I have recording.
Okay.
I don't know.
Was it just like, look at that, and then you stood there for a second, and then.
Did you
turned
stop, or
around?
did
no,
you continue
no, no,
walking?
I kept walking. I kept walking. Well, for one thing, I didn't know what it was going to do.
Did it seem to be watching you, or was it just kind of not caring too much about you?
It was like it was just ignoring me, but I sure wasn't ignoring it. I would say, well, to get from where I was to Matt's house would have been probably 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes maybe.
If you were walking the whole time.
Yeah, and I was walking. Yeah.
Okay. So you'd estimate maybe 3 minutes?
Yes.
Is how long you watched
Or
it?
5 minutes, up to 5 minutes, because I had to go up the rest of the trail and past Matt's house to go in the one entrance, which was at that far end of his house.
Okay.
So I watched it for probably 4 minutes, 5 minutes.
Did you stop, or did you just keep walking as you looked at it?
No, I just kept walking. I may have paused.
Did you have to pick your jaw up off of the...
Yes, I did, and made sure my feet would work. Put the jaw back and make the feet work.
So if the creature had 6 to 8 foot wings, that means the wingspread would be like from your table to that wall where you're at.
Yeah.
About that.
Well, this room is 15, I think, by 15.
Oh, okay. Well, then that would be about it.
So, yeah.
From the window to that wall,
Uh-huh.
15 feet.
That's a big animal.
Well, with a jaw a 1.5 feet long, and then you've got the head and then the crest, so you must have had about 3 feet altogether from the back of the crest to the front of the
The
beak.
crest was pretty good sized.
Okay.
I don't remember any color on it. You know, sometimes you think of a crest of a parrot or something like that. It has color sometimes in it, but it didn't have any
Was
color.
it like the thickness of the beak, or was it more like a small thin thing, or was it big at the beginning and then kind of narrowed out like a cone shape?
You know what it reminded me of? In retrospect, it reminded me of like when you see a little child that has one of these space helmets and it's got a thing off the back.
Oh, yeah. Mm.
That's what it reminded me of. It went to a point
Mm.
in the back.
Did it seem to be made of the same material that the beak was made out of, or was it more of a leathery substance like what the wings were?
I would say it was the substance of the body or the wings. Yeah. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sounds like you saw a pteranodon.
Oh, what?
A pteranodon.
A pterodactyl.
Oh, pterodactyl.
Well, the pteranodon's a particular type of pterodactyl.
According to.
I know one thing. It wasn't.
Paleontologists.
It wasn't a swan, and it wasn't a pigeon, and it wasn't a crane,
Wasn't
or
an eagle.
or an eagle.
Did they have other big birds over there? What kind of big birds do they have?
No,
None at all.
no. Their birds are more like, all of them are like size of bird of paradise, which is really not a very big bird.
So there were no birds as big as this thing anywhere near it. Yeah, yeah. That was that here we could maybe, if we saw something really big, we could say it's an eagle, or we could maybe say it's some kind of a vulture, turkey vulture, or something like that.
They didn't have such things.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, you just have to be mistaken. You're going to hurt our theory.
One fellow went over, I don't know if it was maybe 5 years ago. He was going to get up there and see them, but he couldn't even make it in. It's treacherous to get in there.
He was from Australia, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Very treacherous getting in.
And Marv was telling me that the mistake that he made was trying to go in by land.
That's right.
So if you're going to go, make sure you go by helicopter. Where do you
Steve-
get the helicopter? From the capital city there of New Britain? You can
Yeah.
get a helicopter there?
Yeah. Probably Kimbe, which is the capital, would have them, and then also the mission base had a helicopter.
Mm.
Yeah, it's amazing, but I lost my train of thought. What I was gonna.
Well, we were talking about this fellow that from Australia that was going to go in, and he was going to go across.
Oh, Steve hiked in.
Uh-huh.
He did, and he crossed that river 40 times. And he told Marv, he says, "Dad, don't even try it. You will die trying. Not possible." So Steve is very athletic, and he was able to do it.
Much younger.
Much younger.
I'm sure.
Was
Phil-
he just did he have a raft that he went across the river with?
No, you walk it. He carried his gear up like this with this rushing river.
Oh, okay, I see. Wow.
It's not the depth of it, it's just that it's so rushing.
The velocity of the water.
Yeah.
And then you get all wet and you're slugging through the forest again.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're just asking for some other disease.
So
And the
what you
mountains
need
are
to do-
just, you think of a river, well, that's not bad, there's land around it. It's just up and down to get up to that village.
fall a tree and use a trunk of the tree. I've crossed rivers with trunks of trees before.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is a little
Has to
different
be-
situation though than,
Has to be a big tree though.
yeah, I've done that too. Well, I thank you for sharing all that with us.
You're welcome.
It's-
I wish now I could have had pictures.
Yeah, wouldn't it have been great?
Yeah, if you had a little camera with you and it's like, oh, take a
Yeah.
picture of that.
It would have been amazing, yep.
Well, they'll still will not accept stuff like that, so we will. But the general public is
Nowadays they can fake pictures.
I know,
Yeah.
you can do all kinds of things on the computer, can't you?
Yeah.
To a limited extent. There's some things you cannot copy or duplicate. I seen one phony picture that someone tried to do of a Papua New Guinea style of hut, They took a regular picture and they tried to put a pterosaur in it and had the pterosaur blurred and had the picture in the background be sharp and had the wing going to the water, and it was very childish to even.
Obviously
suppose.
amateur, huh?
Yeah, there's plenty of those all over the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, we'll for our book, we're gonna try to put together a realistic reconstruction of what you saw based on what you talk about, and we'll make it into a picture that people can identify with. So
You know, somebody sent me, I don't know if it was you or Ken Ham's outfit. Somebody sent me a large page and asked me to pick out what I saw. Well, they were so close. All these rows of these creatures were so close to what I saw, I could not identify any one of them.
Well,
And then they said, well, draw it. Well, that's a hopeless thing.
His brother Timothy is a very good artist, and he uses the computer, and he can probably come up with a very good simulation. Maybe even insert your head in there.
we'll do a good job, and we'll send you a signed copy of the book when it comes
Okay.
out. So.
Just out of curiosity, for different reasons, did you see it through like the tree line?
No,
So there was no trees.
no trees.
Okay, so it was a little bit open then.
Totally open.
Totally open. Oh,
Totally
man.
open. There wasn't a tree in sight. I don't know whether the people had cut them all for firewood over the years, but there were no trees up there. I don't know if Steve and his family I don't know what they ended up burning, because they had wood stoves. So did Matt and his family. But there were no trees where I was walking. It was bare, and bare trail, no foliage. It was just
Okay.
bare
So
trail.
could you see like the ocean from where you were? No. There was another hill. Did it have trees
Oh,
like
yes.
on the opposite end?
Yeah. There was the deep riverbed, and then it went up into more mountain.
But that was like forested too, though, right?
I didn't see forest, and in our times in New Guinea, they don't have, except the top of some of the big mountains in the eastern highlands had timber. But otherwise, all you have is what they call kunai grass.
Oh, so it's mainly grass then,
It's-
and it's
it's-
small.
And it's
scrub?
reedy grass, and it's sharp, and it can cut you, and it grows quite tall, like as tall as me.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. That must be what you probably heard the story of Dwayne Hodgkinson. He was a World War II pilot,
Okay.
and
he and his co-pilot.
Hold my notes. I want to get this.
Okay,
You're going to be a star show for that one.
Okay.
I'm going to include this in the video.
okay. Can I talk to Harriet?
Yes, you can
Tell
talk
her.
to Harriet.
Tell Harriet about it.
This is face
Okay.
a little bit toward that window.
Okay. Well, Dwayne Hodgkinson was a pilot in World War II, and he and his co-pilot were forced down, and they landed on a beach in Papua New Guinea. I think it was on the
Down by Finchhaven.
Finchhaven, yes.
Okay.
And the area where they started walking out to try to get help was this tall grass, and I think it's probably what you just described, which is what made me think of it. And something flew past them, something really large flew past them, and it was close to the ground, and it was so big it made the grass go like this. And it flew out past them and made a turn, and then came back lower than it was before. They dropped to their face on the ground, and the creature flew over and didn't go down into the grass to pick them up or anything. But Dwayne got a really good look at it. So did his co-pilot. And Dwayne said, "You know what that was? That was a pterosaur." And his co-pilot said, "No, it couldn't be. They died out 200 million years ago." So he
Yeah, but-
believed that over his own eyes.
Yeah, wow.
That's pretty shallow.
Yeah.
Is it possible to spell out the name of the village that you were in at that time?
Kaiko.
Kaiko.
K-A-I-A-O.
K-O.
Kaiko.
K-A-I-K-O. Kaiko.
Am I missing a? Let's see. K-A-I.
K-O.
Okay, K-O. So there's no A at the end. Okay.
Kaiko.
Kaiko. Okay. Is that in a district or anything? That's
Well,
just
it's in
New
the
Britain
it's
Island?
in the western. It's in West New Britain,
Yes.
and the name of the tribe is the Ata. A-T-A. A-T-A.
A-T-A. Oh, that's okay.
Means great in the one world language.
Okay, and so that's so it's just A-T-A. That's
Yeah.
the name of the.
Ata. They're called the Ata people.
That ATA, I was explaining to Wayne on the way up here, I've done some study of ancient languages, and that's a syllable that's used all over the world.
Really?
And I think it came out of the original one world language, and it means great.
Interesting. They had been called something else in years past, and I've lost the name of it, but the first name that they were called meant garbage.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they somehow the name got changed from whatever that was that meant garbage to Ata.
So maybe they lost a war, and the other tribe called them garbage.
That could
Then they
be.
won the next war, so now they're great.
That's it. You've got it. That's science.
You know, I don't know if we're still on, but
Well,
in the last few days, Creation Ministries International has come out with a little bit more information about some of the possible dinosaurs in southern, actually in small islands off the coast of New Britain and off the southern coast. So it wouldn't have been too far from where you were.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the name of the island. I think one of them starts with U-M.
Umboy?
What's that?
Umboy?
Not Umboy. Umboy's over in the main
Okay.
Papua New Guinea.
I was going to ask you, is this your husband on the right?
Yeah. And yes, it is. And that is not a gun, by the way. That is a tripod for his camera.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
people always say, "What in the world were you doing with a gun on your hip?" That wasn't a gun. That's his tripod case
Okay.
on his belt.
And I'm assuming this one is also